Well, Flagship I actually think was a little more maybe reactive than proactive in the way the company got started. We left Blizzard. It really wasn't our intent to leave, but it's what happened. And so the next day, Dave Brevik and Eric Mac Schaefer and myself pretty much decided to start a new company. Really formed out of the crucible of the fact that we all love making games, that we suddenly were there looking to do something new and decided that, well, why not do it together?
I think that there was a lot of different factors that came into it, but eventually 9 of us left Blizzard North. And for one reason or another, either in some cases people left because of a kind of a negotiation process that was going on there, and some of us left because frankly our bosses had left and we wanted to go and work with these guys that we really liked working with.
Really the thing we wanted to do when forming Flagship Studios, if you wanted to put it in a mission statement term, was to be able to make great games. And that's a really simple idea, but creating games that were easy to access, that people could play, that we could get it out to as many players around the world as possible, and just focus on making really quality products, making just the best games we absolutely could. It's something we've always wanted to do, something we've always strived to do when we were at Blizzard, and so for us in starting a new company, that was really, really vital, was just really focusing on everything we could do to make just the best games that we could possibly do.
Pretty quickly after all of that occurred and the dust started to settle, we had a company of 9 of us, and we had a game idea that was formed pretty quickly, even before I joined. And I joined about a week later and was employee number 1. And we had no place to work yet. We had just this kind of idea. We had a phone number that was out there that different publishers could call and try to contact, and we had. We didn't even have a company name because we kept trying to debate over that, and everything's taken and it takes forever to figure out what to name your company. And we decided to start working out of my house, which we did for about 13 months. Come on in. So this is where Flagship Studios had its first offices. For about 13 months. We had anywhere between 8 and 13 people working here. Upstairs here we had the conference room and our executive area with our CFO, our hiring manager, and our CEO, Bill Roper, sitting here, just kind of filling up the entire room. Over in this area, we had the programming pit with Dave Brevik, our Chief Engineering Officer, myself, and our lead graphics programmers all sitting in here. And then down below here, we had an art pit where the rest of the founders worked, from backgrounds and characters and design early on. This is where we first talked to our different partners about what we wanted to do and gave our proposals, argued over which publisher we were going to go with and what things we were going to do. And this is really where the company lived for at least 13 months.
Our first offices was pretty, I think, classic in terms of how a lot of companies get started, how gaming companies get started, in that we worked out of one of the guys' houses. We had that almost stereotypical starting off in the garage type thing that happened, and it was really great. I actually think that even if a company had the wherewithal day one to get into an office and be fully set up, that they shouldn't do it. They should actually start someplace that's a lot more shoestring, a lot more, almost kind of thrown together in some ways, just from the standpoint that it really forges a really strong bond between the people that are there.
You know, I'd wake up and start to work. Guys would start showing up and driving their cars, packing the driveway full all the way to the street, filling up all over the street with cars, and we'd fill the place up and work till late, and then everybody'd go home.
You know, you're hanging out all the time together, you're kind of in tight quarters, you automatically do things together, you're having lunch, you're spending time together, and it really lays that strong foundation for that solid team that really almost functions more like a kind of a crazy family in a lot of ways. And I think that's a great way to set the tone for a company.
The fact is that the development of the IP is a process that took us a long time. We came up with an initial idea, and then, through that, we've kind of modified it over the time. It'd be, one person would contribute in one way and then another way, and it'd be neat here, let's try and design some of the factions and things like that. And this all came about as a process of a long development. So it wasn't an overnight process. And so coming up with an IP now is a lot different than it was before. And at the same time, we want to do something fresh and cool and different, and yet it also has to be a little bit similar in order for people to really understand what it is that you're trying to do.
The original concept for Hellgate was pretty much our first idea the day we left Blizzard, as David Brevik threw out the idea of doing a first-person shooter meets action RPG, and we just took it from there. Some of the major hurdles we faced were as a team, we had never made a first-person game before, a full 3D game before. So we knew we had to develop our own engine from scratch. We had a lot of engine needs that other games don't face, like randomization of levels and 3D collisions using a mass amounts of characters and monsters. So we knew we were going to end up making our own engine, and that was one of the biggest hurdles, was just developing a prototype for that, deciding what we wanted, and moving from there.
We sat there on day one and talked about what is it that we wanted to do, what kind of game do we want to make. And a few different ideas got thrown around, and then Dave pitched this concept at a very high level that was Diablo 2 meets Half-Life 2. And the idea behind that was coming up with a game that had all of that constant action and RPG elements and randomization and collectability and all these different things that made the Diablo game so popular, but then mixing that with the immersion, the first-person possibilities of a Half-Life 2, the storytelling that we could do, and really kind of combine these to create a pretty unique product.
Hellgate really kind of goes into a new area in the current market. It's much different than any other game out there. So I don't know if it really brings something to the game market so much as it's just, it's just so different than anything out there that it's almost creates its own genre. It's action RPG, which is similar to the way we did things in Diablo, but there is no first-person shooter with the depth that we have, so in that way, it's much different than the other games out there, and it has a lot to offer in that it expands kind of, I think, in some ways expands the first-person shooter genre, and at the same time, it's a lot different than other MMOs out there, and in a lot of ways, it carves out its own niche in the market, and it's much different than anything else out there. And so I think it brings kind of, I hope, something a little refreshing and something different than everything else out there.
We have as a corporate philosophy that we like to provide more value for the gamer. We want to provide more value for less, and so we sat around talking about it and thought, well, a lot of gamers like a good single-player game with an online component in the Diablo style, and so we thought, well, we're going to go ahead and do that. A lot of people like the ongoing content of subscription, and so we decided we're going to do that too. So we're kind of trying to be all things to all people here and provide everything in the box,
from an ongoing commitment to making new content and new areas and new adventures and items and loot and monsters and everything, as well as providing a full product that if you never went online, you'd be getting your money's worth and more out of the same box.
The multiplayer for Hellgate has been designed by a bunch of guys who play a lot of different MMOs, and a lot of different online games in general. We've kind of looked at what we like about what's out there, and we've also looked at what we thought worked really well with Diablo 2. And with the time we've had and the assets we've had available to us so far, I think we've created some really cool stuff. In general, what we're trying to emphasize is that the fun single-player experience that you can get while playing at home translates directly into multiplayer. We're not talking about kind of adapting a multiplayer-only thing like a MUD or something that kind of has a set pacing, a locked-in modal combat, or things like that, and forcing that into a multiplayer game such that your pacing is slow, such that it takes forever to kill one monster, to interact in certain ways, just so it's all happy for multiplayer. Instead, what we've done is we've taken what is kind of a really high action, fast, fun, single player thing that you can now experience in multiplayer. So that's really kind of the first big accomplishment we have as far as multiplayer.
When we did Diablo 1 and we had Battle.net as the first part of that, and it was our first online experience, we learned a lot of lessons. And so taking those, and we used a lot of the lessons we learned there and created Diablo 2, and then we made, mistakes doing that too. And so we've used all of our experiences, some of all of our experiences, to kind of design the game. You get towns with, a lot of people in it, and you can have this sense of community. You can see people running around the stations and wearing different equipment. You can trade and things like that. So you get that community sense of an MMO. But then when you're going out and adventuring, you can go out by yourself, or you can go out with your party, shoot monsters and get treasure and stuff, and you're going out to try and complete quests, and you don't have other people coming in and taking your mobs, and there isn't any kind of conflict there. So in a lot of ways, it's very different than a regular MMO.
Part of the reason we started this game at all in this company is we really wanted to just keep working on a game world. We kind of wish we were able to do that in the past, but we've really set up this world to be extensible. It's called Hellgate London, which immediate in your mind says, well, what about the rest of the world? What's happening in the rest of the world? And we're going to explore a lot of different regions around the world in the future, mostly through this ongoing content. But also, we just have a million ideas. Player versus player, we've got some great ideas there. We want to work that into ongoing content a lot. And everybody just wants cooler looking equipment, cooler armor, cooler weapons. So we'll be making all that kind of stuff.
Was going to be in the future. We didn't really know how far in the future it was going to be. Like we talked about 15 years, 30 years, and we figured we wanted it to be near future so that we still could kind of recognize things, but we wanted it enough in the future where it was plausible that we would have developed a lot of cool technologies and just weird, crazy things. So I sort of approached it like, let's start with the character classes. I figured the Templar were sort of the clearest. They were kind of central to the whole idea of what Hellgate was about. They're classic knights, but they've existed throughout time since the Middle Ages. They would have known about these demons for a long time. They would have been preparing for it, preparing for the invasion. I thought in my mind, if I figure out what they look like, then the rest of it's going to kind of fall into place. And that's pretty much what we did. I knew that I wanted them to harken back to that historical sense. I wanted them to look like they had been around since the Dark Ages, but they had continuously been developing new armor, new weapons, new technology, with a sense of their own history. They look like a knight. They look like they're in armor. You can tell what they are. but they look like a cool future soldier. It's power armor. It's power armor that was built by a craftsman. You know, the Kabbalists, we knew that they were going to be demon tamers, that they would sort of they'd try to work the demon powers, the powers of hell against, you know, they try to understand them and claim those powers and then work them and use them against their enemies. So I figured that, you know, they were going to have kind of a dark feel to them and maybe more of a tribalistic feel, a more Kabbalistic feel. You know, it's just sort of like padded leather and kind of blades and sort of an elaborate headdress that kind of looked tribal. You know, it kind of had that shamanistic feel to it. They would use the demonic parts like horns and bones and skin to protect themselves from the demons, but also to kind of pull that power inside of them and use it against what they were fighting. And then from that, as the look of the Kabbalists evolved, we kind of got more fantasy oriented. You know, the costumes got crazier just because we wanted to, you know, on screen, they have to look cool. So they kind of got bigger and fancier and more elaborate, and it just seemed like the way to go. The Hunters, I figured that I was never really as worried about the Hunters, you know, just because they were the most traditional of the factions. They're basically super soldiers. They use military technology, power armor, you know, fatigues. We wanted them to look futuristic, you know, so they had the weird goggles and doodads that helps them sense, you know, and shoot things from afar, and transmitters, and they came together pretty easily, and I was never really that worried about them. The biggest challenge with them was just preventing them from looking generic, you know, so we wanted them to kind of still have something a little special about them. But, you know, the Kabbalists and the Templars were definitely the challenging ones to get, but the most rewarding at the same time.
Every time you get near the release, it is this mix of pressure and relief. And you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you hope it's not the oncoming train that's there, which we don't see it being. And you can see it, and you're pushing towards that goal. And at the same time, you know that there's still hundreds of little hurdles to get over.
There are so many things about Diablo 2 that I didn't like when we were nearing release, and even after release, that I had a really hard time even playing the game. And I think that it's just because in a lot of ways I'm a perfectionist, and so nearing completion means nearing the end of being able to fiddle with it.
It's just a lot of time. I mean, finishing the game, in order to get all that stuff you want done, to get all that polish that you really want to see in the game, you've worked all these extra hours. You put in that extra time, and you work at home at nights, and you stay here all weekend, and you do things like that because you really want to see these things get in, because you know the clock's ticking, the date's going to come whether you want it or not, and you want that little extra thing to go into the game. And so we're tired. We're working really hard, and we're tired.
You know, one of my fondest hopes is that we can now take this and look at how this event would impact other cultures and what would happen. You know, and the thing to me that's exciting is looking at how all of these elements, heroes, demons, mythologies, how those would be viewed in the realm of the world we've created in places like Egypt or Tokyo or Spain, like all these different areas where they have their own beliefs and they have their own types of heroes, their own archetypes, or they've got their own demonologies, their own ways that they view magic.
Overall, I think the last 10 years of working with these guys has really been amazing, and I obviously can't fully imagine what it's like to work with another development group, but having seen what I've gone through with them and all the different stages of moving to flagship, of finishing Diablo 2, finishing Hellgate now, it's a really great bunch of guys, and it's just really exciting to be with them and to see this creative thing being made together.
We've always wanted to build a world and then do what we have our expertise in, which is making a game. And so it's been a lot of fun, and I hope continues to be a lot of fun in working with people that have expertise in other areas to get their vision into that world and bring that out to people all over the place.